Welcome to Global eFuture Day. I am very excited to be able to be the first person to present at the first Global eFuture Day presentation. Or a Global eFuture Day conference. So I'm very, very fortunate for that. Thank you all for being here. Um, my name is Joseph Hills, and I'm an ELT consultant with eFuture. And I've been here for, it will be I've been with eFuture for 3 years, starting as of May 1st of next month, next month. So, um, I'm really, really excited to be talking to you today. I'm going to be talking about writing assessment. So I hope this presentation is helpful and useful for you. I would encourage all of you to stick around and wait till the end because there will be some useful things at the end. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. I will take looks at the chat as much as possible. Um, but by all means, please uh, ask as many questions as you can. If I can't get to them in the moment, I will try and address as many of them as I can at the end. But let's go ahead and dive in, shall we? So, my presentation is called Writing Assessment for Fearful Teachers. And what I will be talking about today is a couple of things. I'm going to be talking about writing in general, but I'm also going to be talking about how we can assess writing. But before we can do any of that, I want to kind of talk about some of the challenges that surround writing and teaching writing, because teaching writing can be an intimidating thing. And that's because writing is intimidating. A lot of people think of writing in terms of the time that it takes, in terms of the effort, but also a lot of people think of writing as a job. And they think about it as something that takes a lot of intention. Um, and it is probably one of the harder skills to master. Sorry, I see a hand raised. Is there a question? If you have a question, please put it in the chat. If there are no, if there are no questions, I'll continue on. Sorry. Um, yeah, please ask any questions you have in the chat. So anyway, um, if the when we think about writing, like I said, it's one of the hardest skills to master because it takes a lot of intention. Writing is not something that you can perfect, and although the other productive skill, speaking, happens on a daily basis, it's not necessarily true of writing. We don't necessarily write formally every day. Now, probably there are people that do write a bit more than they speak if they're texting or if they're writing emails and things like that. So the digital age has changed that a little bit, but that's kind of informal writing. You're not really caring about grammar and things like that. Um, and when we think about the organization of a book, a textbook, an English textbook, writing is often the last part, the last component of an English unit. And so it can be very easy for teachers to rush over the writing activities or to get through classes. And sometimes the writing activities can easily be forgotten if they have more trouble trying to get through the speaking and listening or the reading parts of the lesson. So writing can sometimes be overlooked, and part of that is because a lot of teachers are scared of writing. Um, one of the reasons writing is so challenging as well is that it is often taught like speaking class because it is a productive skill. But the problem with teaching writing like speaking is that writing and speaking require different muscles, kind of, in a way to think about it. And writing is often thought of as an individual activity because there is really only one person that can take the pen and put it to the paper and make the words. But that's a misconception about writing. And then, of course, students are like rivers, and they are going to go for the path of least resistance. And when this happens, especially with unmotivated students, they are going to often turn writing activities and exercises into kind of repetitive activities that present with the simplest possible responses. And so, if they're not fully engaged, they're not going to produce at their best abilities. So when we think about writing, we should think about what writing class is and is not. And let's start with what it is not. Um, Writing class is not a grammar or a vocabulary class. Grammar and vocabulary are a part of a vocabulary or of a writing class, but they are not the central component of it. They are assisting parts of a writing class. That's why when we look at a textbook, we teach grammar in context rather than teach grammar strictly on its own. There are grammar classes, but those are specialized classes. Um, Writing class is not a sprint. You have to take your time going through a writing activity, and you go back and you revise and you practice again and you look at what works and what doesn't work, and then you move from there. Writing class is not punishment. A lot of the time, we, as teachers, we think of ways to discipline our students, and sometimes that discipline comes in the form of writing. I'm sure you remember if you're a fan of The Simpsons, the show always opens with Bart Simpson writing lines on a board. And that sort of writing as punishment can really turn people off from the exercise of writing for fun and for pleasure because they are connecting writing with something negative from the very beginning. So it's important to remember that writing isn't punishment. Writing class is not silent either. It's a very collaborative class, and it means that there should be a lot of talking, a lot of conversation. Oh, I want to write this. Oh, I want to write that. What do you think about this idea? How, like, bouncing ideas off of each other is really, really important. And writing class, like every class, is not about teaching perfection. We're just trying to get our students to engage with English in a different way and to present their ideas in a new way that maybe they might thrive in. Now, writing class is a class for experimentation. It's a class where we are supposed to make mistakes and we're supposed to learn from those mistakes. Writing class is evaluative, but when we're talking about young English learners, uh, it is not graded. We should not necessarily be grading our writing classes so much. There are times and places where grading and assessment are important, but it should not be the focal point of a writing class. Writing class is a marathon. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of repetition. But those things are not bad when we're talking about learning English as a foreign language. The more practice and the more repetition, the more review that we get, the better off we are. And writing class is fun. There are plenty of writing games that you can incorporate. There are lots of activities that you can use and choose to make a writing class really engaging and exciting. And one thing that a lot of people forget is that writing class is about teaching clarity more than anything. It's getting your students to think about the simplest and most effective ways to communicate their ideas and putting them on paper so that they aren't spending pages and pages and pages writing about what they had for lunch. So Charles Dickens is not the good example for how we want to approach a writing class. We want to think about writing in the terms of Hemingway, if you are familiar with either of those authors' writing styles. Now, one way that I like to approach teaching writing and the way I approach writing in my own life as well is to follow the 5 Ps. The 5 Ps are passion, positivity, perseverance, purpose, and prose. Um, so to put this very simply, passion, you want to love what you want to write, or you have to love teaching to write, which is really, really important. The passion that you show in class, the passion that you display to your students, that's going to be infectious. It's going to rub off on them. So if you are passionate and you show passion about the writing assignments and the writing activities, it will help your students feel comfortable and feel good about what they're about to do. So positivity also goes right into that. As a writer, you have to believe in your strengths, but you also have to accept your mistakes. But as teachers, we also have to promote that in our classes. We have to get our students to believe in what they are good at and what they're capable of. But they also have to learn that making mistakes is okay, and that these are things that they can learn from. Perseverance. Always make sure that you are striving to improve, and that you want to learn from the mistakes that you move forward as you move forward. That's really, really important. You're going to writing. You can't just do it once a week and then forget about it. You should try and do a little bit of writing every day. And then purpose. With any class, with any writing, you should have clear goals and objectives. And then finally, prose. This is probably the least important one, but KISS your writing. So KISS stands for keep it in a classroom. It would be keep it super simple. So keep your writing super simple. Keep your lessons super simple as well. We want to really promote clarity over everything else. And when I say that, I mean I care less about proper grammar and punctuation overall. Those are things that we can easily correct, but clarity is something that we have to really take some time to teach. So our objectives. The goal of every writing class is for students to produce something, and that they should produce this with clarity that demonstrates they understand. We're not focusing on mastery here, but we want them to show that they can understand the class's language points. And we want to encourage our students to experiment, as I've already mentioned. Um, Making mistakes is one of the best things a student can do in class because they're in an environment, or they should be in an environment where making mistakes is a learning activity in and of itself. Mistakes should be encouraged through positivity and through perseverance. But the students who are more willing to take chances are the students who actually improve at a higher rate. So encouraging them to take risks with the language that they use, create an environment for them to try different things and to ask questions about the things that they aren't sure about is one of the best ways to really engage with your students. So make them feel comfortable, make them feel welcome in your class. And that'll really go a long way to making writing something easier to teach and easier for your students to work with. Now, because we are talking about assessment specifically, some of the general assessment tips that I try to encourage are the first, ask yourself, what am I trying to assess? Have clear learning outcomes that you want to focus on. Make a rubric, but don't just hold that rubric to yourself and then use it to grade your students' writing. No, give the students the rubric and show them exactly what they need to do to succeed. A rubric will go very, very far. We're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. Um, Use peer review whenever possible. This is really, really useful. It's another way to review, it's another way to engage and make your class more interactive. Have your students work together. That's really, really important. And encourage your students to demonstrate their information literacy skills. So, if there are opportunities for them to do research, encourage it. Let them use the internet. Let them use books if you have a little mini library in your classroom. Even, dare I say, let them use like ChatGPT, see what they can find and discover from that, and have them explain what they've learned through all of those things using generative AI. Don't let them write things using generative AI, but Allow them to use it for ideas and creating ideas for writing prompts and things like that if they're at that level. And then make sure your assessments effectively evaluate the tasks at hand. And this goes back to that first question: what am I trying to assess? So if you are assessing your students, you want to make sure that you are not going for the general that will kind of prohibit or restrict how well your students are going to succeed in your class. Make sure that you are specific and intentional with the way you assess your students. Let me take a quick sip here. Okay. So, planning and assessment. Now, the way I like to approach planning a lesson, and this is especially useful for writing class, is using something called backward design. And backward design for a lesson plan is starting with the assessment and making your way back there, making your way back from there. So we start with the desired results. Basically, I ask myself, what do I want my students to understand, to know, and do? And this is what we call establishing learning outcomes, to put it very simply. So we need to establish our learning outcomes first. What do I want my students to know in class by the end of class? What do I want them to leave the class being able to do? Then from there, I plan my assessment. So I need to come up with ways to assess that they have established understanding or comprehension of the learning outcomes. And then from there, once I know how I will assess, I know what my learning outcomes are, this is when I start planning my learning activities. This is when I start planning the games, the specific warm-ups and wrap-ups that I have, the discussion questions that I might create, all of those sorts of things. This is the last thing that I do. If I go from the beginning, if I start planning activities first, I go, oh, I want to play this game. Um, you can get yourself lost. It's very easy to get trapped where you're like, I love this game, but why are we playing this game? Why are we doing this activity? We need to understand the motivations and the goals of our lesson before we can really plan the things to support that. So let's talk about learning outcomes. So what a learning outcome is what learners should know or be able to do by the end of class or by the end of a term. You can plan learning outcomes for short term, for the short term, and for the long term. It's up to you to decide how comfortable it is. But for each of your class, you should have a learning outcome, at least one. Um, and learning outcomes are also how we take class learning and transfer it to other areas. So transferable learning means that the things that you are learning in class, the students will be able to take this and apply it to other areas of their lives. And that's the goal. That's why they go to school. It's so that they can learn things and then use them immediately. With language, it's very easy to track how that would look because we ideally want them speaking English outside of class as well. So our learning outcomes, you can call these objectives if you want as well. Learning objectives, these are very, very important, and they're something that we should really think consciously about when we plan any sort of activity, not just a writing class activity or lesson. Assessment. Assessment is how we determine that learning outcomes have been met. And there is more than one form of assessment that we can use. I will talk about each type in just a moment. But there's also more than one instance for assessment during class as well. So when we think of usually when people think of assessment, initially they think of kind of the proving that they have demonstrated their learning, which is a kind of the summative form of assessment. But there are ways that we assess throughout a class. Some people would call this performing checks. Others would say that this is just a quick review or a refresh. All of these things are types of assessment, but assessment and testing are different. Testing is a form of assessment, but assessment isn't necessarily testing. And then finally, these learning activities. With our learning activities, we want to encourage exploration. We want to embrace the six C's. There are no longer four C's, there are six um, in 21st century learning. We want to support those learning outcomes with our activities. We want to prepare our learners for assessment with these activities, and we want to make our activities as multimodal as possible. So we want them to be presented in different ways throughout our class. So let's take a look using an eFuture book here. So this is from my first writing, the our eFuture early level eFuture writing book, skill book. And you can see here that the unit is my favorite animals. This is a very, very fun topic, an easy topic to write about and to discuss. So how would we start? Where would we start? We start with the end, learning outcomes. So I want to think about what my learning outcomes will be, my objective. And I create this learning outcome through very, very careful language use. So, learning outcomes I formulate them by saying students will be able to, and I will choose one or two action verbs to use to describe what they will do. Because action verbs are things that we can actually assess. Um, if we say students will be able to understand, um, how do I assess understanding? It's a really difficult thing to be able to assess broadly and across an entire class because understanding can manifest itself in many different ways. So instead of saying understand, I will say identify and describe. So these are things that I can assess. If I hold up a picture of an eagle, my students will be able to identify that eagle or they will not be able to. And that's something that I can assess. If I show them a picture of a tiger and a zebra, the students will be able to describe how a tiger and how a zebra look the same or how they look different, key characteristics, things like that. So those are using those types of verbs, action verbs, will help create a learning outcome that you can assess. So my full learning outcome here, students will be able to identify and describe animal features, to discuss an animal they like. Now, the final part of my learning objective there is to clearly outline what I want them to do uh, after with their newfound abilities, right? So there's got to be a reason for what they're doing, why they're doing all of this. Now, I also add two goals. I like to have learning goals in my classes. Um, and these are kind of things to help guide the learning outcome, but also ways for me to measure the success of my class. And so my two goals here are students will practice using descriptive adjectives, and students will write at least 3 sentences describing an animal they like. Now, if my students can't do both of these in one class, that is okay. This also just helps me guide my next lesson. So if they accomplish the first goal, they're able to practice using descriptive adjectives. This is great. I know that they can use some descriptive adjectives, and then I will take this and start this as my review or my warm up in my next class. But I also know they haven't written down 3 sentences that explain why they like the animals that they like. So then, okay, I know I need to plan this and make this my learning outcome for my next lesson. A very, very useful way to create those action verbs or to choose those action verbs is to use Bloom's taxonomy of verbs. And so there's a list. You can find these online. I have a specific one that I like here. You can use these action verbs to create your learning outcomes. And this is something that takes a lot of practice. But if you can do it, it will really, really elevate your lesson plans and give them a clear goal and something to strive to. And of course, you should be sharing your learning outcomes with your students as well. Don't keep them hidden away. Now, my assessment plan, once I have created my learning outcome, I need to think of ways to assess how are my students going to be able to identify and describe animals so that they can discuss animals that they like. Well, there are certain things that I can use, certain forms of assessment, graphic organizers, information sorting, jigsaw discussions, sentence writing. And for me, the teacher, I need to also assess myself. So I need to do self reflection after my class is over and examine how the class went and how it went well. So I can plan out my assessment in this way. Graphic organizers, these may not be things that you necessarily need to create. They might already be in the book. And with my first writing, there are graphic organizers already incorporated into the book. So some assessment can get planned before you can get planned just by using the resources that are available to you. Others are going to be in class activities. And then other forms of assessment will be the things that your students are actually creating. And then once we have our assessment plan set up, we can then choose the games and activities that support our assessment and the objectives for each of our lessons. So the three assessment types, I mentioned this earlier. We have diagnostic assessment, formative assessment, and summative assessment. Now, these terms are important, they are useful, but they're more helpful for you as a teacher. A diagnostic assessment is a very simple, short form of assessment. And basically, this is a way for us to learn what our students already know. So a diagnostic assessment is usually going to take place during a warm up or during a wrap up. Um, so they're very, very simple. You probably already do this as you go through with your warm-up activities. If you do discussions, if you have surveys in your class, some people at higher levels they'll offer surveys, or they'll have students fill out surveys, things like that. Or just during review sessions, these are all kind of diagnostic assessment times. However, when you give directions, when you explain things to your students, that's another form of diagnostic assessment. So if you give your students, you go, okay, class, today, for this first activity, I want you to read this story passage, and I'll go back so you can see it. There you go. I want you to read this passage here, and I want you to circle all of the words that you think describe a lemur. Um, so, what is the first thing that I want you to do? What is the first thing I want you to do? I want you to read. Very good. And then after you have finished reading, what do I want you to do next? I want you to circle words that you think describe a ring-tailed lemur. So that right there is a very simple diagnostic assessment. I am assessing that my students know how to conduct an activity. That's a very useful form of assessment. Now, a formative assessment is very informal in its structure. And we use formative assessments to provide feedback during our classes. So examples of this would be reaction responses, comprehension checks, or if at a higher level they need to do research. If you're doing project-based learning, you're going to need to prepare a list of resources or uh, citations, things like that. But checking those sorts of things and giving feedback on those sorts of things is formative assessment. So, asking your students after you've read a story together, what did you think of the story? Formative assessment. Um, Performing comprehension checks, asking them, okay, who is the main character in the story? That's a comprehension check. These are formative assessments. It helps you identify where they need to continue on, where they need to grow, and so on and so forth. Then summative assessment, which is probably the ones that people are most familiar with. These are the formal structure types of assessment. And these are what we do to evaluate overall learning. So tests, essays, portfolios, presentations, these would be more summative assessment because they show everything that the student has learned, and it demonstrates their comprehension over all of the main topics. So, in a writing class, summative assessments are usually going to be those final writing products, the final things that your students create. So, for young learners, that may be 3 sentences. For upper level students, that might be a paragraph. And for other higher level students, it could be a full essay. So, summative assessment will usually in a writing class be about the final writing assignment that they do. But if you are breaking up your writing class into multiple parts where they're not necessarily writing a full paragraph in one class, your summative assessment might be to assess what they have completed in your class and then how they have progressed forward in subsequent classes. So, how do we remove the fear from writing class? This is the important stuff. The first tip I have for you is to organize your information. So use graphic organizers and address ideas in small chunks. I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with the term chunking, information chunking. That's really, really important here. Present things in small pieces and scaffold them so that they are comprehensible for your students. Talk through ideas and explicitly model everything. So, in a writing class, like I said, writing is not an individual, quiet, silent activity. It's something that can be very collaborative. Um, so you want to focus on showing them how to do this, work through this together. So if you have a graphic organizer like this, like a bubble chart like this, the first thing that happens is you, as the teacher, you get to the front of the class, you go to the board, and you fill out an example with the students and work with them through. Don't just fill it out and explain what you did. Uh, Build it from the beginning. So start with that first thing. If we're looking at the first example here, write a lemur and then fill in each of those bubbles. And if you know they're going to be working with a lemur, then choose a different animal so that they are not necessarily just going to copy the answer that you're providing. But you want to work through and model every aspect of the writing with your students. And this goes along with making that environment comfortable. If your students see you writing while they are writing, it will make them more comfortable as well. Of course, you want to help your students. You want to be actively participating and observing your students as well. So take some time to write with your students, complete the writing activity that they're completing, but then make sure that you're also available to help them. So organize your writing like this. But also scaffold your graphic organizers. So I love um, for a writing class the when you expressing your opinions, your thoughts, and your ideas, really, really important. Again, we're talking about favorite animals. So when you talk about something that is your favorite, you have to explain why it is your favorite. And that is usually opinion based, not necessarily fact based. So, one potential area that you can use is the Oreo graphic organizer. So Oreos, the cookie is delicious, but it also helps you with your writing. And Oreo stands for opinion, reason, example, and opinion. And this is how we formulate an argument based off of our opinions. So we give an opinion, and that opinion can be as simple as my favorite animal is the lemon shark, which is it is my favorite animal. Um, my favorite animal is the lemon shark. And you give your reason. So I like the lemon shark because I like the lemon shark because it's just a cool looking animal, and it lives in an interesting part of the world. And I also like sharks. So all of those are reasons. Give an example to support your opinion. Now, this is usually the most challenging one. So to support an opinion with facts is something that your students might struggle to do. But they can say, "Oh, for me, I would say, oh, I like lemon sharks because they are uh, very interesting hunters." Um, and that's enough of a reason to support why I think they're cool, right? Um, and then restate your opinion, but restate it in a slightly different way. So if I said my favorite animal is a lemon shark, I go, and that's why lemon sharks are my favorite animal. So simple restating there. You can lay that out in a graphic organizer like that, but as you get into higher level, higher order writing and thinking, then we can start taking that simple Oreo and turning it into multiple Oreos. And you can create a graphic organizer that does that. These are just some examples that I found online, but you can create any graphic organizer that suits your needs. Fearless writing. Tip number two, use a rubric. So I've mentioned this already. Um, Rubrics evaluate the learning objectives that you create. They are assistive and therefore should be shared. Don't hide your rubrics from your students. Personalization is possible. I like to actually use a rubric where I leave one of the columns or one of the rows blank. And I go, with each of my students, I let them choose something that they want to work on, that is unique to their writing. This is really, really useful because this is a form of self reflection, which is important for assessing writing. So ask your students, what is it that you want to get better at? And even young learners, they can say, oh, I want to be a better speller, or I want my handwriting to be better. And you can add that to their specific rubric. And they can also grade themselves on that. You can go, how do you think you got better with your handwriting? How many spelling mistakes did you make? Things like that. But it gives them some sort of agency with the way they are assessed. And you can both assess their ability to do that. Um, and rubrics are iterative and progressive. So it's really, really helpful to link and review information through your rubrics. So if you had specific learning outcomes, you can keep those learning outcomes as part of your next rubric. Um, to kind of and turn them into like core things. So if one of your learning outcomes was spelling, uh, and you've used that, you've created a rubric to improve spelling, you can then later on take spelling and make that one specific component, a core component of any future rubrics, because your students already know that that's something that is important. Um, Rubrics are generally used with summative assessment, but they can be helpful for guiding formative assessment as well. And they can be as simple or as detailed as you need them to be. So it's really important to choose what works for you and what works for your class. If you need a really detailed rubric, and you want to be really granular with how you approach your assessment, that's fine. It just takes a lot of extra work. Um, and if you grade your students using these rubrics, make sure you have a clear and consistent grading scale. So some people will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've seen rubrics that just have like a happy face, a neutral face, and a sad face. But make sure you're consistent with that grading scale so your students are never surprised. Um, and then finally, make sure your rubric actually evaluates your learning outcomes. So if your learning outcome is identification and description of animals, you make sure that that is what your rubric actually is checking. If your rubric includes something about grammar, um, then it's not necessarily appropriate unless it's your core. It's one of your core components that your students are already familiar with being assessed on. So make sure that your rubric actually matches and evaluates the learning outcomes. So there are plenty of rubrics that you can download online, but and you can find these. The one problem with this, these I'm using here just to present as examples. But I really discourage downloading rubrics from other people's classes because their rubrics are designed to grade and assess their students, not your students. But you can always go online and look at other people's work to kind of give you some ideas. So these are some kind of just very basic, simple ways to assess writing that these people have created. There are certain elements that I really like. I love the happy face and the neutral face. There's no sad face. Um, and that I like that they use pictures. I like that they use in the first one especially they use sentences using I statements so that it's really reflective of the student's work, things like that. I like that there's a space for comments. Um, so these sorts of rubrics, because you should be giving these out to your students, they should be clear enough for the students to read and comprehend as well. Um, you can use AI to generate a rubric based on your specifications, but this also takes time and effort. You want to make sure that your prompt is thorough enough that it can create a rubric that will be appropriate for your class. Um, if you are skilled enough with AI, go for it. If you are not, I would say just write it out and make one by yourself. I prefer to make my rubrics by hand or by computer, but it's really up to you, whatever you are comfortable with. The next fearless writing tip: collaborate. Um, so feedback should be collaborative and not solely teacher directed. Have your students look at each other's writing and have them, this goes back to peer review, have them go, oh, tell each other what you really liked, what you didn't quite understand, things like that. What they compare their writing and say, oh, I approached it differently. Um, or your ideas are different from mine, but they're nonetheless interesting. Have them talk about these things and share what they wrote. It's really, really useful. And it's less stressful as well. The way I like to think about review and collaboration, teachers are quality control. So the teachers are the ones that are in charge of coming up with the ways to make sure that everybody is accomplishing those learning outcomes. They're on the same page. But the students are the ones that are in control of the creativity. So you have certain objectives that you want to meet, but it's up to the students to choose how they meet those goals. Um, and when you do this, make sure that you are eliciting response from your students. Get them to talk about what they're writing, what they intend to write, have them share ideas, uh, share their thoughts on the writing process, not just the content. Write with the students, like I mentioned, and then use discussion to guide learning as well. So some really basic but important questions to ask. What did you find that was easy? What was easy to accomplish? What was difficult? What have you enjoyed writing? What have you disliked writing? Where are you finding your information? What inspired you to write this? What do you need or what do you want to learn? And these are questions that you can ask your students, and they can give you answers to some of this. But these are also questions that, as a teacher, you should ask yourself. And so when you think about the lesson, so that next time you go, oh, you know what? They actually needed maybe an encyclopedia or they needed some additional resources to talk about the animals that we were learning in class. Next time, I'll make sure I have those in class so that my students can excel a little bit more. The next, second to last, I believe, writing tip that I have for you is know the difference between assessment and being corrective. Um, And this comes with comfortable assessment methods. So when we want to help and guide and encourage our students, but like I said before, we really want to encourage experimentation and taking chances. Um, so we want to, in our class, create an environment that eradicates the fear of making mistakes. Make your class comfortable. Make it a safe space for your students to try different things without fear of struggling or getting a bad grade, things like that. But also every moment is a teachable moment. So use those teachable moments and incorporate them into writing. It's really, really useful. Corrective feedback is important, but do it in small doses. Like if your students are having trouble spelling a word, or they're struggling with punctuation or handwriting, give them reminders, soft reminders, but only really focus on one thing at a time. Let's fix this time. Let's fix your spelling this time. Next time we'll worry about handwriting. Next time we'll worry about punctuation, things like that, so that the students don't get overwhelmed, and that they can show and demonstrate that they have improved in small bits. So we scaffold our correction as well as our instruction. Um, Remember too that can correct assessment can correct us, but it is also a way to praise. So remember to praise your students when you're assessing them as well. Show them and make sure you tell them that they've done a good job. It shouldn't be a scary process. So just to wrap up my presentation here, remember some important things when you are planning to work backwards. Start with the learning objective, then the assessment, then plan your activities. As a teacher, be aware of your strengths and weaknesses. Treat writing class like writing class, but incorporate those other skills like speaking and listening and reading into your lessons. Remember the 5 Ps, and use graphic organizers and rubrics to your advantage. Make your class collaborative, and of course, promote a class environment that is supportive and comfortable. So I have come to the end of my presentation. Thank you all very, very much. I finished right on time. Um, so I'll take a few moments to answer any questions if you have any questions. But please also, uh, if you'll be so kind, please take this poll, uh, fill out this poll very, very quickly, um, so that you can uh, just so we can learn a little bit about how you feel about the topic and everything like that. So please fill out this poll. If you have questions about any of our products or our eFuture needs, you can contact our partners. I know the poll's kind of blocking the screen, but you can review this later as well. So do please fill out the. Oh, thank you very much for filling out the poll very quickly. Um, if you have questions from partners, you can contact them there. You can also contact us at eFuture as well. Um, my email address is there. And also, please check out our YouTube, our Facebook, our Instagram. And finally, on screen there, you have a QR code. This is for the certificate for this presentation. If you scan the QR code, you can it'll lead you to a place where you will automatically be sent your certificate for this. If you don't have time to do this now, this QR code will be provided to you at the end of all presentations. So if you are here for multiple presentations, you can scan this QR code and get the certificate at a later date as well.